Why am I passionate about the electrical vehicle and about, let's say, the electrification of transportation in general? I think I have more experience than most people. I have driven across America and across Europe in an electric car. Why do I do this? To prove a point? I do it to demonstrate that the future is now. It works in absolute terms. People are hung up with this whole range anxiety or the car or the cost. It's coming, it's at our doorstep. People will not recognize global transportation in the next 5, 6, 7 years. And it's going to be augmented by the consumer behavior of young people, which are increasingly looking at access, not ownership. And as this goes into the next phase, you're not going to have petroleum-based cars and buses because you got to take the friction out of the system. They take care of themselves. According to Royal Dutch Petroleum, in their scenarios, only 19% of final energy usage today is electrification. That took 120 years to get to this point from the invention of the AC induction motor by Nikola Tesla. It's going to go to 50 to 60% of final energy use as electrification. It's going to happen in the next about 40 years. Think of the gravity and the implications for copper and the enablers of electrification. So we have it compressed, and we're no longer mining 2% and 1% copper. This has to be done with lower grades in 3 times the speed, and it's going to have way more copper intensity. You do not have to get out a pencil and paper to figure this out. It takes 10 times more copper to make offshore wind parks, 4 or 5 times more copper per bus, per car. Final energy usage, electrification. I lose no sleep at night about the future demand of copper. When you look at the reserves of oil and where those reserves sit, and if you look at, first you have the sovereign states, then you have large publicly listed companies. Based on their current output and current demand, there are many entities that have about 100 years of reserves. So what's the future demand of oil? There are many prognostications you have between big oil and experts. But when you start layering in a little bit more of an aggressive scenario with innovation, adoption, technology, fuel switching, there's a delta of 40 or 50 million barrels a day in the next 20, 25 years. So who's going to be right, who's going to be wrong? I always point to people that eventually, and it's not 20 years from now, but in the near term, the oil business is no longer going to be a growth business. Every time that we offset the demand for oil, and just to recap, only 55, 56% of current oil consumption is used in transportation fuels. So enhanced products, probably a growth business, plastic, rubber, petrochemicals, transportation fuels, it's going to be muted. But when you adopt from the internal combustion engine, you're going into electrification. Where are the reserves of copper? That's a totally underappreciated situation. So if you look at where the reserves are, based on current demand, we've got globally around 20 years of copper reserves at this copper price. So unless the copper price increases dramatically and you give those larger companies 4, 5, 6 years to reclassify what is now an uneconomic resource, you're not going to be able to feed what is, I believe, going to be 4, 5, 6% CAGR growth rate for the demand of copper. So what's going on in Saudi Arabia? That's exactly what Vision 2030 is. It's a pivot into innovation, technology, or put a different way, electrification. I can assure you, they are very interested in all of the enablers that make electrification possible.